Good morning, folks. How you doing? We are super geeked, super amped to be here today for the Librarians with Spines Author Showcase. My name is Yago Kira. I'm a bilingual outreach librarian in Los Angeles, and my co-host, helping me put this together, is Autumn Anglin, and she's the artistic director, the vision behind all of the Librarians with Spines books. So we are super geeked and amped today to be speaking with Judy Lee and Melissa Cardenas-Dow. So I just want to give everyone just a thing. We're going to do the introductions, and then we're going to try to fit this in between 10 and 11 because we know people have to go to work, and we're really trying to be mindful of everyone's availability. However, if Judy and Melissa can stay and you can stay, we strongly advise that. Because it'd be great just to, be in the same Zoom with them. It's an honor. First off, I just wanted to kind of say thanks for showing up. We really appreciate it. And I want to introduce these two bosses of library outreach work and really just kind of celebrate their work and celebrate all the things that they have imparted, all the knowledge that they are imparting to us, right? So let me get those intros. You're gonna have to be patient with me. Sometimes I have these bouts. So Melissa Cardenas-Dow is a social sciences librarian at Sacramento State University, campus in the California State University system. She's been working in libraries and library professional associations since 2009. She has also been involved in many diversity initiatives through the American Library Association's Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services, working to infuse diversity and social justice throughout the association and the library profession. She's currently an ALA counselor at large and a co-chair of the ALA Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Implementation Working Group. So everyone, please help me to welcome Melissa Cardenas-Dow. Let me take a breath, maybe a sip. Judy Lee is currently the University Programs Teaching Librarian at the University of California, Riverside. Prior to the recent reorganization, she was a reference and instruction librarian with selection responsibilities for Asian American Studies and Women's Studies. In the first half of her career at UC Riverside, Judy participated on campus committees related to diversity and inclusion, right? Affirmative action, women, Asian, and Pacific Islander affairs. Over the last decade, her diversity and inclusion branched out into the community, grassroots historic preservation, Chinese American and Japanese American, Multicultural Council Museum, Day of Inclusion programs, Asian American walking tours. And so please help me to welcome Judy Lee to where we're meeting today, to this space that we're creating today. So I guess, let's really kind of launch into this. As I've stated too many times, maybe, I think it's maybe making Judy and Melissa a little uncomfortable, but I'm really geeked because this outreach thing is really difficult to do. And people who don't know, imagine that outreach is passing out swag, which it decidedly is not. Swag is a prop, it's a tool. It's kind of like that light bulb, and those really pelagic fish bottom of the sea that have that little light bulb to attract people. The real proof in the pudding of outreach is the interpersonal champion style that people bring to it. Like when we talk to people like people and we stop talking to them like they're patrons, in a sense, right? So we're super honored. Last week, we put a call out for people to hit us up with their questions, and we received an amazing question. Amazing. That's like 23 A's. Amazing question from Stephanie Valdivia of CSU Chico. Okay, she sent us an awesome question about a week ago, and Melissa, Judy, if it's okay, I just really want to honor like this question because I think it's really important. And if it's okay with you, we'll just start here. But the question is the academic environment a place you feel comfortable being your whole selves, right? Whole in quotation marks, right? I struggle in higher education settings, which I feel aim to neutralize me as a BIPOC person. How do you manage these dehumanizing settings and take care of yourself, right? How do you retain a part for yourself? What has been the most rewarding coalition building experience? Maybe that is something that gets you through it, right? So it's a kind of twofold question. Melissa, Judy, however you guys, in your chapter, you guys work so well together that I'm just gonna shut up right now because that's what I need to do. So please, take it away.
Okay, Judy, do you wanna take a stab at this first?
Okay, I'll do it if you want me to, sure. Wow, two parts to that question. In terms of feeling comfortable with my whole self, I can't say yes or no. It's a yes and no depending on the circumstances. Being APIA has its little things that go with it because there's the model minority myth, and then there's the, oh, are you so privileged you sort of become invisible and you blend in, or it is assumed that you blend in with the others who are privileged. So sometimes, yes, I feel more comfortable, sometimes no. So like, even in a work situation, I assume things are going along. And then somebody that I've known for a while, who's a work colleague, will bring up a comment that brings me up short. And at that time, I have to make sort of an instant decision to address it or not address it. And how does my relationship with that person, I will have concerns as to how it will continue or progress or regress. So there's those kinds of things. There's kinds of things when things seem to be fine, and in some ways I feel like in an academic environment or work setting I have more freedoms to be more of my whole self than maybe in another type of a work environment where things are a lot more structured and rigid. And like I'm sort of thinking like either civil service or maybe public libraries where I can't do the kinds of things I might be able to do. So it's sort of a yes and no. And then the other thing about most rewarding coalition building experience. I think for me, most of the things that happen where I feel favorable about it is this whole point of intersectionality. I really like it when I get asked to make a presentation in a class, not because of libraries, but that's another question altogether, but because they recognize that I had done some work in the community and they felt that that community work bears bringing to light in an academic setting, in a classroom, and exposing to students those ideas and concepts to students. So those intersectionalities, like, oh, my outside community work goes along with my library work. I mean, I've been introduced in an ethnic studies class where I've done that, and then the instructor says, oh, and by the way, for those papers that you're working on, you should go see Judy because she's a librarian and she's right over in the next building. So those kinds of things are what happen more often. But in terms of the most satisfying coalition building, was probably my first in-depth involvement in community grassroots organization. And for me, that was the Save Our Chinatown Committee that was involved in trying to save a heritage site, an archaeological site that would have been destroyed because a contractor wanted to develop and put a medical office building in it. That's where it was a lot of the nitty-gritty work. And if you're talking about true coalition building, that involved people on campus, people in the community, various groups. Like in Riverside, there was the old Riverside Foundation. And that group is mostly Caucasian people interested in saving old buildings. Why were they helping us and the archaeological site? Well, it's interesting because apparently they had other political run-ins with the cities on things like development and such. So it's being able to do that, and that grassroots effort came about at a time when the National Trust for Historic Preservation was trying to bring more people of color, BIPOC, into historic preservation, and there was a meeting that started pulling people together to talk about historic preservation of Asian and Pacific Islander places. So that went on a national level. We even got some communications internationally. So that probably is the strongest positive sense I felt about true coalition building. Whereas the other things were more like, oh, I really appreciate the intersectionalities of different parts of my life coming together in my professional life. Over to you, Melissa. I don't want to like beleaguer the.
Okay, so the first part of the question, Yago, could you repeat it again, please?
Sure. Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. It is loaded. It totally is. And you know, but I gotta say, like, it was just it really resonated with me, and I think it is a really kind of sincere and candid question. So I guess the first part is.
Oh, I'm sorry, Yago. I think before the question part, where she's talking about being in higher education settings, where she feels like the setting aims to neutralize her as a BIPOC person. So I mean, I think that's really key to think about and address.
Totally. So I think the question is the academic environment a place you feel comfortable being your whole selves?
Okay.
And then I struggle in higher education settings, which I feel aim to neutralize me as a BIPOC person.
Yeah. So I have a long answer and a short answer. And the short answer is I really sympathize and empathize with Stephanie's feelings. I have made a decision long ago that it's not a place where I would bring my whole self. So therefore I'm not comfortable. That's the short answer. The long answer is, even though I do have that feeling, right? It's still imperative that we work towards greater inclusion, that the inclusion that we as BIPOC feel in such a setting is not just lip service, according to the organization and the institution. Because right now, like, we're living in a time where everybody's talking about anti-racism, like being an anti-racist university, right? So I think in a sense, like, this shouldn't only fall onto BIPOC, because, you know, we deal with a lot more already. But we really should hold our organizations and institutions accountable. Like, what do they mean by this, right? And for us as individual people, we really should think about what is it that we're contributing to the environment, the workplace environment, that has this as a really significant quirk of the work environment in academia. You know, in addition to also thinking about what is it about academia, the academic environment, that brings about this feeling, especially for BIPOC people, right? Like, for me, I think it's this adversarial positioning that I find very off-putting. And also the idea of collaboration is not traditionally honored. You know, so working with other people is kind of like, even though there's great, we say that we value this, there's also signals that say that no, it's not. It's not as valued as being a solo worker and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, that type of thing. So already right there, there's a lot of things that are against you for bringing your whole self into the academic environment. Now, oh yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Melissa.
Okay, so the second part of the question is, which has more to do with coalition building. I have to say, I have to be honest also that compared to Judy, I'm really much more of a baby at this. So I'm not as experienced. And really, I really look to Judy for like all the things that she has done. And we worked on a project. I see Rhonda here. We worked on a project to highlight Latino American, so Latino American history when I was working with Judy and Rhonda in at UC Riverside. And in my mind, that was like an attempt at coalition building, because we had people within the university, like the library included, going out into like student programs, like the division of it's co-curricular. They're a group like it's a counterpart to like in Sac State would be like student affairs, right? They're not like a departmental like teaching department. And we also partnered with outside groups. And one of them is the Latino Network. And I found that very invigorating. The big thing that I think is great about that is we had a lot to learn just from the academic side, going out into the community. Like there was a lot of wisdom that they had to impart. And I wasn't convinced that we, who's inside the university, actually listen or honor that relationship. So, and that was revealed through this work that we were doing. So I found that personally rewarding. I hoped it continued, but you know, like since it was like a finite project, it didn't go beyond that. And since I don't work at UC Riverside anymore, I don't really know like what had happened, like in terms of building on the foundations that we had done.
But that's a good point, Melissa, in terms of like legacy. I find myself having benefited from EDI programs. Like I started my graduate career at UMass Amherst on a fellowship. So, right. So I just find, you know, sometimes it's not very genuine. The collaboration is, and then these projects mysteriously have like a shelf life. Whereas there's other projects that it seems they occupy space and time like they're in a multiverse, because they can occupy several and it's like not a problem. But certain programs, it's like no, we did that, that's the shelf life, let's move on.
Yeah. And
so it's very telling. And I think that most BIPOC can tell when they're being fed a line, you know. And yes. But you know, I want to just go to the second question, but I also wanted to stop and reflect. And you know, lately something that I've been thinking about too is how sometimes BIPOC can act in a very ill way towards other BIPOC. And sometimes it's intentional because, you know, there's competing politics, there's competing interests. You know, people will be surprised at how Machiavellian a library system can be, right? So there's competing interests, and that's what we can all do that, right? But sometimes, you know, it's not really the allies that are kind of like obstructing. Sometimes it's someone who maybe not your own ethnicity, but definitely would identify as a BIPOC person and is still doing this. And then there's the whole thing of like, well, if you as a BIPOC person see someone being taken advantage of and you don't speak up, what is that saying about how you identify? Because it's like, it's all gravy when we're all like, you know, we're all pulling for the same team. But the minute there's something internecine, all of a sudden it's like, no, no, no. You know, we start parsing, right? And we start saying, no, this is this type of Latino. This is this type of Latino. I'm this type of Latino, right?
Well,
So, you know,
Yago,
yes, ma'am.
yeah, maybe that can point to the importance of relationship building before there's a crisis. And how do we do that? And how do we sustain that? And I just want to back up a little bit about Melissa and her example. That was a wonderful project. I thought it went really well. It got a grant, right? Grant from ALA. So yeah, that alone determined the shelf life. And then both you and Stephanie, who spearheaded it, were not at UCR later. So sometimes I think it's who's around, because with faculty in a quarter system trying to get programs for their students and such, it's out of sight, out of mind. So, you know, I think part of it not continuing was just the fact that neither of you continued at UCR afterwards, because there could have been some other residual with that. I mean, working with the faculty who did get involved with the program, maybe, you know, doing some more community partnerships and such. I mean, I remember walking across the hallway to your office and thinking, wow, she's so cool doing all of this stuff. And I'm really impressed by the organization and such that you bring to it. And those are the kinds of things we need to try to salvage from those events and relationships and repeat those, keeping in mind some of the things that might not have happened or errors and such, with an eye toward improving that, but still pushing forward with relationships. I think it's really, really hard. It takes a lot of courage, power, and stamina to continue those relationships, because once those relationships are established, it's like, hey, I know you, you're legit, I believe in you, I got your back. That's the kind of thing that we want to aim for, right? And if other people in the audience, you know, have those kinds of experiences too, I mean, it might be nice to hear that, you know, and please share in the chat.
Yeah, guys, please. I've been sharing the whole time, having a conversation with Judy and Melissa at the same time. So I'm taking full advantage, guys. I am telling you.
And speaking of conversations, it's been great working with Melissa on this chapter, because I think we approach these things from different experiences and backgrounds, of course, but I always thought that Melissa was much more grounded in the scholarship and the theories and such. Whereas me, I just kind of run out and do some stuff. But it was nice for us to talk to each other, because Melissa would bring these theories, erudite concepts, or concepts I might have thought about, but I didn't really think to bring it into play. And then she would say, what about, and I said, oh yeah, well, like in this case, for example, I did this, or when working with these type of people, this happened. So I found it a great experience working. It's like theory and practice coming together in a way. So thank you, Melissa. Publicly, I want to say thank you. I've told you this before, but thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I think,
and our colleague Rhonda back there is going thumbs up. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody else.
I'd like to say thank you too. When Melissa brought that idea into the library, I was really hesitant, knowing how the library administration really only wanted projects seemingly to have credit to themselves. And this then brought it back to the librarians with a lot of outreach and a lot of coordinated effort in the community. I was so impressed that I learned so much. As a librarian, I just want to thank both of them that they gave me that opportunity to participate in that had the wonderful vision, the wonderful enthusiasm. So anyway,
But Rhonda, you bring up a very good point, as does Judy and Melissa, right? Like the gains that we are able to add to our menu of things that we can do when we do collaborate, when we do reach out to other BIPOC, it really, really, really helps to kind of highlight what our strengths are. So there is definitely a reason why collaboration does work. And there's a way that it looks like when it works, and there's a way that it doesn't look like when it works. And so I think, you know, we have to be conscious of that. But, you know, speaking of programs, would you guys mind giving us, because, you know, you guys wrote this chapter, what, 2 years ago? It's been about
Yeah.
2 years, right? It's been,
Wow.
right. And you know, like we could talk about, you know, Inchas later, but like you guys, what have you been doing? What are your current projects? Please let us know. We want
Okay.
to know. We have answers. I mean, questions. We want answers. Please let us know.
Okay. Well, okay, so I have to say, because Ray's here, Ray Pun. So Ray Pun and Kenya Flash and I are co-editing a book on basically cultural ethnic studies librarianship. And so we're going through like the proposals. No, I think we've done that. So we're now working towards like, what was it? Like solicited chapters and ushering that through. So we're going I'm working on the other side, which is what Yago, Autumn, and Max had been doing. So that's the other side of publishing, which is really exciting. And I really love the spirit of collaboration that my partners here have been doing. So it's really fruitful work. Also, it's a work of passion. There's great passion and interest and love that is in that work. Sorry. What about you, Judy?
Oh, I have not been writing or working in that realm. Besides everybody's situation of trying to turn on the dime, right, since COVID and last March, everybody's lives are topsy-turvy. I talked a little bit in a chapter about working on the Day of Inclusion program, and just really briefly, the Day of Inclusion was a holiday set up in the California legislature a few years ago by then Assemblyman Mike Eng, that they decided to take the day when the Magnuson Act, which repealed all those Chinese exclusion acts, they celebrated the day that it was signed. And so I think instead of looking at the glass half empty, like, oh, that was bad, he decided to look at it as good and talk about California celebrating that day as a day of inclusion, to look at all the different cultures and celebrate that, and communities and such. Well, anyway, it turned out that that was passed in 2009. So since 2010, Riverside has been celebrating the Day of Inclusion, and the City Council has signed a proclamation declaring December 17th as the Day of Inclusion in Riverside. And so the Multicultural Council of the Riverside Museum Associates would sponsor that. And so I talked about that in the chapter from like 2018. So in 2019, December 2019, a year ago, we had another one. We had a big plan for it. My goal has always been to try to involve more UCR people into it. And so we had something, and I was sending out information to different people, including some faculty, saying this year's Day of Inclusion at this place. And one of the faculty members had written back to me and said, oh, Judy, do you know anybody in the Japanese who's active in the Japanese American community? And so I wrote back, well, no, not really, but I'm on the foundation board for the Harada House, if that's anything. So anyway, communications led to another, and it turned out that there was a research trans-Pacific working group that has been working multi-campus in UC, working on the Japanese diaspora. And they wanted to write up grant proposals to bring a conference to UC Riverside. And this would be the first year they would include Japanese Americans in it. So they were eager to find something going on in the Japanese American community in Riverside. So got together with them, wrote a librarian support for the proposal for them, like deadline was within a week, had them come to had some of them come to the Day of Inclusion program where I was able to introduce, make connections with, oh, here's the local president of the JACL, here's the director of the museum, which has the caretaking responsibilities of the Harada House because it was donated to the city. So all of those kinds of things took place. And it turned out the faculty member I was in conversation with also brought her husband, who happens to be a faculty member at UCR, but he was also chair of the academic senate. So one of the things I wanted to do was to bring more UCR people into the community, because I don't think they would have ordinarily traveled to that community center where the event was held. So it was nice to see that. There was a large number at it. So everybody who attended was impressed just because of the large numbers and the presentations and the awards and all of that. So I feel like my greater goal, personal goal, has been accomplished in some ways. And then the other big thing that's really been happening in my life is being on the foundation for the board, of the Harada House Foundation. The Harada House itself is one of 2 National Historic Landmarks in Riverside. So I run around saying 50% of Riverside's National Historic Landmarks are BIPOC. So that gives me great pleasure. Unfortunately, the house is falling apart. So we need to have a great big long fundraising campaign to try to preserve the house and maintain that National Historic Landmark status. It is important because it was one of the legal cases that supported the 14th Amendment, that children of immigrants who were born in the United States are citizens and therefore can't own property. So that was one of the major reasons why it was a National Historic Landmark. The other is that it is also representational of a particular family story within the internment of Japanese Americans. So it's one of the few that represents all that. So it talks about social justice and civil liberties. And this year, we got notice of 2 things that are biggies in National Historic Preservation. One, we were named as one of the 11 most endangered historic sites in the United States. And 2, it was one of the very few that got, I think it was the only one in California actually, that got awarded the maximum amount of a matching grant, $500,000. So yeah, it's really thrilling. So there's a lot of publicity trying to get on, and now the foundation board has to kick in high gear when it too is almost like a grassroots community organization. It's very small. So that's probably the biggest thing that's been happening for me.
Thank you guys for filling us in, and thank you, Judy, for providing such an easy segue to our next question. And, like we spoke over the weekend just to kind of prepare and make sure everything was moving smoothly. And like, I'd never heard of the phrase servant leadership. And then it brought up a really, really interesting question. So, I did some research on it, and even Austin CC kind of has a lot of their pedagogy and the curriculum based on that. And it's really interesting, but like, I guess, could you guys talk a little bit about servant leadership? And then, maybe we could start there, because I'm sure you guys might have some ideas, especially talking about all the grassroots campaign stuff and all like the real community work that you guys do. So I would love to hear like how I can emulate that in any capacity. So please, what is your definition of servant leadership?
I don't really know that much about servant leadership. It was a phrase that came up from a student who was looking at it, and I was in an honors class and they were talking about it. So I had a discussion with my boss about it. I said, blah, 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 servant leadership. And she said something about being slightly uncomfortable with the term servant leadership. But when I was kind of looking at it, it seems to me like a type of philosophy. It's sort of altruistic, and Melissa, I hope you'll be able to address this. But in some ways, to me, it seems like it's almost looking for the perfect person, individual, a good person to be in leadership. And so it makes me wonder what happens if you don't have some of those qualities. I'm not perfect. I don't think I can do this. I mean, and then there's probably gradations, but anyway, It seems to me we want to move toward that. Whether somebody actually attains all of that, that's another question.
Thank you. Thank you. Melissa?
I was reading a little bit on this and thinking about what I had thought about it previously. And what I'm gonna say is like the definition of it reveals itself when you contrast it with something else, right? So when we think about leadership, like the traditional tenets, like what is like, how does leadership look like? We have kind of like a mental model of it, right? Like what that is. So that's a long story of saying that basically I think of servant leadership as an approach, although there are other things with it. Like, you know, there are probably other definitions. It comes from philosophy and actually it's very, I believe it's very germane in like, community organizations, nonprofits, and probably in religious organizations, because the big idea that I understand servant leadership is the story of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. Like that image is the idea, as I see it, is the person who is supposed to be the big all end all and is going to save the world is serving the people that are supposed to be serving him. So that puts, what do you call this? Like a contrast to what we think about traditional leadership, right? So the idea that a leader is supposed to be in service of the people who he's supposed to be supervising, he or she is supposed to be supervising. I think that's a very germane aspect of it. So a leader who is thinking about his employees, the HR factor, right? Like what are the needs of the employees that he or she is supervising, will be emulating that type of leadership. So in a way you could think about it as an approach. And then I was also came upon this article, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was also contrasting servant leadership with transformational leadership, because that's another term, which is often juxtaposed with traditional ideas of what leadership is. And both of them have things in common. Transformational leadership may have approaches towards HR personnel issues that look like servant leadership, but ultimately the bigger goal is towards the transformation of the organization, right? So servant leadership, on the other hand, is more about the personnel, they're there to, like they as leaders in their organization are there to help their supervisees to realize their potential. Transformational leaders could have aspects of that. So I would say that in real life, like if we go outside of theory and we go into practice, that there's no like pure, you know, like people kind of just like pick and choose. But we could also say that we have like, is it that most leaders that we experience, just think about your experience in the workplace, right? Can you pinpoint like aspects of your experiences with your boss or your supervisor that are going towards one or the other? So that's what I think.
That's it. Thank you for that. You know, I think you guys bring up a lot of amazing points. You know, the thing about servant leadership, what I think of as a fallen from grace Catholic, my parents are from Argentina, so I had no choice to be Catholic. It reminds me a lot of like liberation ideology and the Jesuits, And for me, like I came first across it as a poet when I read Ernesto Cardenal, right? Who was actually an ordained like bishop, and but also an amazing Latin American poet. So this idea is definitely not new. And thank you for really reiterating or kind of like modernizing or updating it. We had someone in the chat actually say that and Day, that's sorry, that's the
Yeah.
name that I see, was saying, well, now it's even sometimes referred to as steward leadership. I think that's it's phenomenal that like we can approach this, because to be fair, I feel like like I haven't stepped in foot inside of a church in so long that like I like the epistemological kind of angle of it, of liberation ideology. I'm just not crazy because you contrast that with the detail of Las Casas and the details of the sacking of Tenochtitlan and all this other stuff, and it kind of doesn't really jive, right? So but it is very functional, and we can take and pick and choose
Yeah.
what we want. That is the strength of a diverse kind of personnel. And Melissa, I do want to also just say I completely agree. Like personnel is an organization's most important raw material. And like for a person who knows how to motivate, how to refine that material, you can get jet fuel. You can get jet fuel from like tar ooze. You really can. But it's a certain person that knows how to refine that, right? And to really kind of make it naphtha, right? Jet fuel instead of just kind of crud. So thank you for that. Let me move on to the next question. Just
Actually, Yago,
sorry, Judy. Sorry.
sorry. Just if I had to respond with the one-word definition for librarianship, it is relationships. So that ties in with what you were saying there.
You're completely right, and I'm sorry. I that was super rude of me. Can you kind of, because yesterday when we talked, what you were saying, and again, I kind of I agree. Well, not that you were saying, you saying a colleague told you this, but having trouble with the phrase servant leadership, right?
Yeah, servant.
Yeah, I think at a certain
So
point you have
so
to step away
so I
too.
tried to substitute for her. I said, could you just think about it as service
That's right.
rather than servant?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that, Judy? Because I'm really interested. We want to
Well, I mean, it
retain.
sort of shifts um the idea that anyone is subservient to another. Let's just not deal with that part of the relationship, but everybody has the goal of providing service, and the question is, how do you go about providing service? So some of the characteristics that have been listed in whatever the tenets or the philosophies of servant leadership, actually, if you remove the word servant and just look at those tenets, they're qualities one would like to emulate and bring to any kind of a relationship, working situation. It doesn't have to be work, but whether you're doing it for community good or not. And also thanks to Daylily for bringing up the stewardship. I've heard stewardship described in dealing with with historic preservation projects. What are our responsibilities? And the goal is to preserve and make available to others this historic site, to talk about its importance, its relationship to today, not just historically, maybe connecting things from times past to the present. So yeah, the stewardship, relationship building, and how we treat each other as human beings, and everything stems from that. And that's service.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Thank you for clarifying, because I think it's really important. I find sometimes we invest so much of ourselves into something that there's really nothing left. And like I've worked in very difficult environments, and I've always found that you have to retain a part of yourself to go home to. And so thank you for that, because I think a lot of people are eager as we come out of library school. We want to do a great job. We want to work for our communities, but we also have to make sure that we're not working ourselves to death, really, or to exhaustion, right? I let me ask you this: how can BIPOC in positions of public-facing power decrease their sense of self-doubt, so they don't suffer from, quote, imposter syndrome? How might institutes make BIPOC feel their contributions actually matter? What does that look like, or what can it look like in a perfect world, or just in a regular one? Judy?
Yours.
Okay, so the reason why I'm smiling is because Yago said in the actual world, I was like, okay, can we do like a blue sky thing where, you know, basically it's not, you know, basically idealization. And I think in a perfect world, there would be recognition of individual, I don't know, the word that comes to mind is proclivities, but basically that each person has their path, right? They have their strengths and they have their weaknesses, and they have aspirations, things that they want to achieve. Right? And an organization, in my mind, that is able to see this and say, this person is valuable to us because they do this, will also reciprocate. You know, the idea of the social contract. So ideally, that is what we want, because we do have a social contract, whether, you know, we realize it or not. Right? But a lot of the times, like in reality, I feel like there's a lot of welching that's going on. And like when we talk about things like, what can we do so that we don't work ourselves to death? Part of that is also like the responsibility of leaders in the organization, right? What are the responsibilities to us? So in a perfect world, I would like to see that. That is actually what I would like to see, that, that the social contract is honored at work, that yes, there's a recognition that we are human and therefore we need replenishment, we need inspiration. These, it's not enough that we have our basic needs met, like our medical and dental care and, you know, those types of things. We do want to be inspired. We want to be energized by what we do, right? But that's not our reality. So that's why there are writings on vocational awe. A lot of emphasis on self-care of librarians of color, because we're recognizing that the spaces, the professional spaces that we inhabit are not always safe, right? And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Melissa. Judy?
Good. I'll just add on a little bit to that, which is, if you're in a leadership position and it's public facing, I also think part of the responsibilities of leaders, true leaders, is to model the behavior that you want to see. And that takes courage, it takes vulnerability, and it takes flexibility. I think it would be really difficult, but if one could pull that off, it would be so successful in many ways. So if there is a BIPOC leader who might recognize something, I mean, it's easy enough to, when you're in agreement and such, but if either you're not in agreement or, hey, this is a learning moment for me, or I may have made a mistake, to be able to admit that, to say that. It's not so much the making a mistake, right? Because people who are watching will assume a mistake or not, you know, call it or not. But it's what one does afterwards. Everybody stumbles. What do you do to pick up the pieces and carry on? And it's trickier if you have to pick up the pieces and carry on publicly. But if it's done well, the outcome is good, then the impact of that outcome is even more widespread. So I think that's a consideration that we all should think about too.
Without a doubt.
Because and so there's leadership like a boss, somebody hired, etc. But there's also leadership with a small L. You're part of a work group. This is the whole thing about relationships matter, whether it's in big arenas where public eyes are watching to small working relationships. And I think, and we talked about it in our chapter, that we should recognize the small opportunities as well as the big ones. And maybe if we were all to practice more at the smaller level, that hopefully success begets success, and that moves us to the larger levels where it might even be public, right? That was the original question, right? About
Completely
BIPOC
agree.
leadership and what we want to see in the, so
That's an excellent
just building on what Melissa was saying and thinking about the modeling part of it.
I think the modeling part is key, and that's what I mean a lot. But when I say that, we have to be careful, because sometimes it's not all BIPOC people think the same way. And
Right.
there's even, for example, I taught 3 years inside the LA County Jail. As a brown person, I've tried my whole life to stay out of that. My thing is that I didn't know the first thing about that environment, right? But it took a lot of humility. It took a lot of smarts not to get stabbed for 3 years, right? But also, it took a lot of me asking questions. Because of that experience, I now am completely against the death penalty in any way, shape, or form. Whereas before I entered, this line of work, I had different ideas about justice and what it meant for people of color specifically. So Judy, that's a phenomenal answer. Thank you so much. The reason you ladies are such bosses, or such, excuse my French, badasses, is because the way that you approach things always is with love, compassion, and just badassery. And I have to say that it's really inspirational. It's inspirational for me, because I need all the help I can get. And it's quite wonderful to know that that there are people who are walking the walk and talking the talk, and that outreach is not just about like how many pens I can give away, but about real lasting community work. Like, that's at the core of like what we do. That's at the core of who we are. So I really just want to take a second and say thank you to both of you, because it's really inspirational. It really is. And I am so proud to have examples like both of you, and to work with, to have you guys talk to each other for our benefit. Are you kidding me? This is like a dream come true. So thank you.
Well, yeah, if I could say right back at all the people from Librarians with Spines, because this has provided a venue for many different people to get together. Melissa and I have written the chapter from our own perspectives, which is as APIA women, but I think a lot of what we talked about cuts across. So having fora like what you all present allows us to share that, and for you to record it and make it available to different people later. That's wonderful. I personally think you should go back to the idea of the salons where people just come together and chat. I think that's worth exploring again further,
Autumn, our artistic,
Yeah.
our artistic everything, has actually suggested that several times, and like I love that idea, and Max does as well. He's actually, I think he started calling these things salons, because like we didn't know. We're like, is it like a webinar? Is it like, what are we gonna do with this? And then so we bought the URL, we bought some server space, and then now we're putting it up. And so it's a very DIY kind of thing, but no, I mean, thank you. Like, so let me, because it's 10:54, guys, and I want to honor everyone's time, especially now during the pandemic. We're all working and stuff. But is there anything that you guys would like to address? Is there anything? How about this? We're taking submissions for Volume 3 until February 2021. And we invite everyone here, please share it with your friends. We want students, we want tenured academic librarians, we want public librarians who don't feel like anyone listens to their ideas. These are the people who we want. And guys, please, this is who you're going to be publishing with. These giants in the library field: Loida Garcia Ferbo, Judy Lee, Melissa Cardenas-Dow, Kimberly Keaton. I'm not making this up. You can look, it's in the books, right? So what chapters would you guys like? What would you like to see in volume 3? And Melissa, Judy, we can start with you, please.
I'm sorry, I thought that would be more of a great question to have to throw out to everybody rather than, I mean, I don't necessarily need to respond or determine that because there's a lot out there I don't know.
You're totally right. You're totally right. Judy brings up see, this is why you're such a boss. Guys, people that are listening, please put in the chat, like, any ideas, and please don't forget February 2021. So you have some time while you're eating Cheetos and catching up on The Mandalorian. You can send us a chapter. And I know that's what you're doing because that's what I'm doing. So send us a chapter. We want to read it. We want you to kind of rub shoulders with these giants. That's what we'd like. So please put it in the chat. And again, Judy, yeah, I mean, like, what I was thinking, maybe the question might be is there a library trend that for you is going to have a little more prominence, like, in the future? Like, you know, we just had that executive order about, like, Wi-Fi and the digital divide. It seems like California State Library is finally paying attention to the fact that there's a whole slew of people who have no connectivity. And these are children. These aren't just like some dude that, you know, doesn't have a PS5. These are like kids who don't have these Wi-Fi hotspots and stuff like that. So library systems are counteracting that and trying to do that, right? So is there anything that we should be on the lookout for, Judy?
I would like to see more relationship building across the different libraries. You know, that there's been that stereotype of academic libraries being really snooty, but what can academic libraries in their areas do with working with school districts or the public libraries, and how can they harness their different budgetary resources for materials that might benefit certain kinds of populations? But the idea is that they all would work together and maybe get more bang for their buck. Outreach, and also working with other kinds of community organizations. I mean, to me, museums come to mind, but maybe there's something else as well. I would like to see some more of that.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Judy. Melissa?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that in terms of, like, libraries, not just, like, all kinds of libraries working with community organizations, because just based on my discussions with several other librarians, is that what we had seen is that a lot of community organizations are actually surprised we exist or that we're working on X or whatever that is, right? So just, this is within the context of, like, voting, for instance. Like, they were surprised, like, a lot of community organizations that are focused on getting out the vote and, like, basically fair and equal elections, that type of thing. They're surprised that the library or public, academic, whatever kind of library would be viable partners. And I'm wondering if a lot of that is because, I don't know, we stay in our lane too much, or, or, you know, like, where actually, you know, where we're going, there are no roads, you know, that type of thing. So, because we, yeah, like, public libraries already, like, they do, like, voting information types of stuff. They do stuff on taxes. There's all this stuff that libraries do, but I don't know why there's not that communication with other community organizations that are so focused on those things.
Another part of that, again, this is establishing relationships, really, and finding out what's out there, who's out there, and who you can work with. What if the organization you work for does not recognize that as part of your primary responsibility or your work. And therefore, those kinds of efforts are not rewarded, much less recognized, or even thought of as being important. So how does one get a lot of those different organizational purposes and missions to align where the ultimate benefactor would be the community?
You're totally right, Judy, and that's an amazing question. We're at 11 o'clock right now, and I just want to do one shameless plug before I leave. Speaking of collaborations, this is a book, you guys know, Inspiring Library Stories, and the editor and we both work for different library systems in the same county, and yet we were able to put this together. And this book arises out of a person coming into enemy territory for my zine workshop and talking with me about a manuscript they've had for 5 years that they can't get published. So the idea that different library systems talking to each other is counterproductive is categorically false. And I just want to make sure you guys know this makes an awesome stocking stuffer. Anyways, you can get it on the website at www.hinchaspress.com. That's HINCHAS press.com. Guys, I have to go. I'm very sorry, but I did want to say before I did leave, you don't have to leave. Okay, this is a space that you know, but I wanted to say thank you so much to Judy Lee, Melissa Cardenas-Dow. You have given us, ladies, so much in our field. You have given us so much inspiration. You have provided us with a way, with like a route and a circuit, right? And like, that's really important. My parents are immigrants to this country. They could not, like, I used to go with my mom to LaGuardia until she couldn't go no more. At LaGuardia Community College in Queens, I'm sorry. So like, it's very important for me that you guys exist and do the work that you do, because I know that you're thinking about people like me. And I know that like any way that we can give back is really, you know, please just don't hesitate to ask. We really appreciate your inspiration and your guidance. You guys are amazing. Thank you. With that, I'll go. Autumn, is it okay? Is it okay if I gotta go? Do you mind wrapping up if it is it? Or...
No problem. Thanks, y'all.
Guys, thank you so much, ladies. You guys are so awesome. Thank you. Such bosses. Thank you.
Bye. Oh, Christina left. Christina had a comment in the chat about resistance from community organizations who view academic libraries as hostile and stuff, and that just reminded me of a community group that a community meeting that I had attended, and people from the community, because basically, sorry, there was a faculty member who got a research grant, was working with people in the community, and it had to do with the State Citrus Historic Park, which is in Riverside. And one of the community members said, oh, golly, yet another academic research program. They come in, they do their things for their research grant, and then they leave. And what does the community benefit from this? And what happens afterwards? So that it's just that triggered that memory, Christina's comment. So, you know, there's kind of like distrust and suspicion on all sides, and it's based out of experience.
Yeah, it's what do you call it? It's well-founded, like kind of like what Max had said when we met this weekend about like someone studying us again, you know, like
right, exactly.
That's really important, because like there is like I was talking about the social contract, and pretty much the idea that there is a responsibility, and that we as academics are making this extraction, right? Like there has to be a give, and we're not just, what do you call this? These are people, right? Who function through relationships. People have relationships with each other. So I think it's really no wonder why people would say that, you know. But anyway, thanks for this, Autumn.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
for everything. This was wonderful. We really appreciate it. Thank you for
It
your
was kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. And we'll definitely revisit the salons. I just love that idea. So
Well, I mean, if more, I mean, there's more for more for people to talk about. I mean, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now, and just wanted to thank you guys so much, and thank you for your chapter. It was incredibly inspiring. So I just reread it again for the 5th time, you know, in prep for this. So I just love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.